Fox News. Is Darius Bell the new face of corporate entitlement? CNN. Darius Bell's viral moment. A reckoning for America's meritocracy. Business Insider. What Darius Bell's interview reveals about race and success in America. Meanwhile, Madeleine Royce was in full damage control mode. On her show the next morning, she delivered a tightly rehearsed statement. I respect Mr. Bell and his achievements, but I stand by my questions. As a journalist, it's my job to ask what the audience is thinking. If those questions were uncomfortable, that only proves they were necessary. Translation. She wasn't backing down. Darius watched from his office, shaking his head. Across from him, Tasha scrolled through a flood of new emails. You're not going to believe this, she said. We've had a wave of new investor inquiries. People want to work with us. Darius smirked. Let me guess, some of the same people who ghosted us last year? Tasha shrugged. Controversy's good for business, apparently. But it wasn't all upside. Some clients quietly pulled out. A major corporate partner suddenly decided to reevaluate their commitments. And then came the darker side. Death threats, hateful emails, menacing phone calls. An unmarked package showed up at Innovius HQ. Inside, a single sheet of paper. One word. Enough. Tasha's face hardened as she read it. You need security. Darius let out a slow breath, rubbing his temples. He had expected this. Any time a black man spoke too boldly, too truthfully, too unapologetically, this was the cost. But backing down? That was never an option. Now he faced a decision. Let the backlash silence him, or turn this moment into something bigger. He stood at the window, looking out over the skyline. The last 72 hours had been a storm. Praise, criticism, threats, offers. He thought of his younger self, the kid from Birmingham who fought for every opportunity, who saw doors slammed in his face while others walked through freely. Now, here he was, at the center of a national conversation he never asked for, but couldn't walk away from. Tasha stepped back into the room, her expression unreadable. We just got an offer, she said. Darius raised an eyebrow. From who? She laid a folder on his desk. A major network. They want you to do a one-on-one televised special, a deep dive on race, business, and the system. Darius exhaled. So now they want to listen. Tasha gave a small smirk. Looks like it. Then, after a pause, what do you want to do? He leaned back in his chair, thinking. He could walk away, let the buzz fade, get back to work, or he could take the mic, not for fame, not for attention, but to say the things no one else would. Darius opened the folder, scanned the proposal, then set it down. He looked Tasha in the eye. Tell them I'll do it. Her eyebrows rose slightly. You're sure? He nodded. Yeah, but on my terms. Because if the system wanted to put him in the spotlight, he was damn sure going to own the narrative. Darius Bell's viral moment wasn't just another trending controversy. It was a reckoning. It forced the nation to confront what it tries so hard to ignore. Race. Success. Who gets the benefit of the doubt? And who has to prove themselves over and over again? Some called him an activist. Some called him arrogant. Some said he was exactly right. But one thing was certain. No one could ignore him anymore. So, what do you think? Does success mean playing by the rules of a broken system, or rewriting the rules altogether? Let us know in the comments. And if you believe stories like this need to be heard, subscribe. A soft, bitter chuckle. Then let's start by telling the truth. Another silence followed, but this one felt different. It wasn't discomfort anymore. It was impact. Madeleine's expression had changed. It wasn't just the live audience watching Darius now. It was the entire country. Then came the moment. Darius turned slightly, eyes locking directly with the camera. I know what some of you are thinking right now, he said. Some of you are nodding because you've lived this. You know it's real. He held the stare. And some of you are sitting there, arms folded, frowning, telling yourselves none of this is true, that I'm playing victim, that I'm imagining it. He paused, lips pressed together for a moment. But deep down, you know I'm right. The studio fell completely still. No one moved. No one even breathed. Then, "All right, we need to take a quick break." The producer's voice crackled through the speakers. Madeline forced a pleasant smile. "We'll be right back with more after this." The cameras cut, but the moment had already done its damage. Within an hour, clips of the exchange were everywhere, but the real storm hadn't even started. The video hit social media like a sledgehammer. By the time Darius got to his car, his phone was blowing up. Texts, missed calls, non-stop notifications. Twitter was ablaze. Darius Bell just exposed media bias live on TV. This was powerful. Truth hurts. The way he looked into the camera and spoke to the whole country, chills. He said what needed to be said, but not everyone agreed. Here we go again. Another rich guy acting like a victim. Cry me a river. This is why companies don't want to hire activists. Race card again. Try working hard instead. Merit greater than identity politics. Cable news picked up the clip within the hour. Some pundits called him courageous. Others painted him as combative or divisive. By lunchtime, the Morning Exchange released a polished, neutral statement. "We value open dialogue and diverse perspectives. While today's segment became more intense than anticipated, we remain committed to balanced and respectful conversations." Darius laughed when he read it. "Fair," he muttered. "Right," his assistant Tasha called him. Her voice was a mix of disbelief and laughter. "Do you realize you just lit the internet on fire?" Darius rubbed his forehead. "That wasn't exactly the plan." "Well, congratulations," she said. "You're officially the most talked about entrepreneur in the country." He didn't answer. He knew what was coming next. Because viral moments don't stay viral. They become battlegrounds. And the next 48 hours were going to be a fight. But now, it wasn't just about him anymore. By the next morning, the story had spilled out of social media and into every corner of the media landscape. Cable news panels were debating it live. Opinion articles were pouring in from every major outlet. Everyone had a take. Companies not hiring more diverse executives. Darius tilted his head slightly, a flicker of resentment behind his calm demeanor. "No accountability. None," he said. Madeline pressed her lips together for a moment. Then, "So, what do you say to people who believe success today is based on hard work, not race?" Darius let out a slow breath through his nose, then locked eyes with her. This was it. "I'd say," he began, "people love fairy tales, especially when they're the ones benefiting from them." A ripple of silence swept across the set, the kind of silence that lingers. "Let's be honest," he continued, steady and clear. "Black entrepreneurs are still denied business loans at twice the rate of white applicants. We receive less than 2% of venture capital funding, and even when we succeed, we're asked if we truly earned it." Madeline sat still, listening, but not necessarily hearing. "So let's stop pretending the system is fair," Darius said, his tone calm but unflinching. "It's not, and the only people who don't see it are the ones it was built to benefit." Another silence, thick, unmoving. The producers didn't cut to commercial. No one in the control room stepped in. This was raw. Madeline shifted in her seat, finally showing a trace of discomfort. She opened her mouth to say something, but Darius wasn't finished. Because this was the moment the country would remember. She cleared her throat, glancing toward the off-camera producers. No lifeline. She was in it now. Darius adjusted his watch, let the tension hang just long enough to be felt, then leaned back. "You want to know the real issue?" he asked, his voice lower now, more intimate, but heavier. Madeline hesitated. What? Darius didn't blink. The bar isn't set in the same place for everyone. She shifted again. Meaning? I mean, he said, a mediocre white man can fail upward in this country, but a brilliant black man has to leap through flaming hoops just to get a shot. Someone in the control room swore under their breath. They knew this clip was going to explode. Darius kept going. A white CEO can run a company into the ground, bankrupt it, fire thousands, and still walk into another job. But a black CEO has one rough quarter, and it's suddenly proof we weren't cut out for leadership. Madeline tried to jump in, but he wasn't done. And the best part? Darius gave a dry laugh. When we actually succeed, people like you sit across from us and ask if we got here because of some handout. Silence. Madeline's jaw tightened, just barely, but the camera caught it. Darius leaned in slightly, not aggressive, just solid. You wanted to talk about fairness? He let out a quiet breath. Posture gave her away. She wasn't expecting him to laugh. You're telling me that in a world where 90% of Fortune 500 CEOs are white men, where major tech funding still overwhelmingly goes to white-owned startups, the real issue is that people like me get too much press. Madeline tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear. I'm just pointing out that in today's climate, some people feel there's pressure to highlight diversity over pure merit. Darius exhaled, shaking his head. Merit, right? He glanced briefly at the cameras, then back at her. Let me ask you something. Madeline, do you really think that if I wasn't exceptional at what I do, I'd be sitting in this chair right now? Her lips parted slightly, but before she could respond, he kept going. You think I got here because I played the diversity card, or do you think I got here despite everything designed to keep me out? The silence in the room was louder than any of her previous questions, but Madeline wasn't done, not yet, because she had one last card to play, the one designed to break him. Madeline took a slow breath, shifting in her seat just enough to make it look casual, but Darius saw a crack in the facade. She glanced at her cue cards again, then set them down. This next part she wanted to deliver directly. Darius, she said, tilting her head slightly. I think it's fair to say you're passionate about this, and I respect that, but let me ask you something. Darius gave a slight nod, waiting. Do you think some of this outrage is exaggerated? She paused, letting the words settle. After all, your success story proves that the system isn't as stacked against black entrepreneurs as some claim. The audacity. Darius could feel the heat creeping up his spine, but he didn't let it show. Instead, he let out a quiet chuckle, shaking his head. You know, he said, voice measured, it's funny how people love to use one success story as proof that a problem doesn't exist. Madeline's smile stayed put, but something in her eyes flickered. Darius leaned forward, slightly resting his forearms on his knees. Let me put it this way, if one person climbs out of a burning building, do you point at them and say, see, the fire wasn't that bad? Madeline opened her mouth, hesitated, then closed it. Darius wasn't done. The fact that I made it doesn't mean the system isn't broken. It just means I fought twice as hard to get through it. He let his words settle. Even the studio crew had stopped moving. Madeline adjusted in her seat, reaching for a controlled response. I understand your perspective, but let's talk about another side of this. She turned toward the cameras, slightly, her voice adopting that carefully neutral tone used for damage control. Some might say your frustration isn't really about race, she continued, that it's about resentment toward larger corporations. After all, you've publicly criticized big tech. Billion-dollar corporations fail to land. She let the question hang in the air. The implication was clear. How did you get here? Did someone pull strings? Darius tilted his head slightly, as if considering his words carefully. It's called work. Madeline, some of us don't have generational wealth or country club networks to fall back on, so we build from the ground up. Madeline gave a small nod, like she was hearing him. But she wasn't listening. But surely you had help along the way. She pressed. Maybe a mentor, a program, something that gave you an extra push. Darius exhaled quietly. Yeah, help came in the form of working 3 jobs while getting my engineering degree. Help came in the form of sleeping in my office while I built my first software prototype because I couldn't afford rent. That's the help I got her lips pressed together for a fraction of a second. The producers standing behind the cameras were locked in. Now, Madeline shuffled her cue cards again. And yet some would argue that black entrepreneurs today have more opportunities than ever before, that programs like affirmative action, minority business grants, and government incentives exist specifically to open doors that weren't open decades ago. Darius leaned forward, slightly resting his elbows on his knees. You know what's funny when a black business owner succeeds? People always ask what programs helped us, but nobody asks which old money bank helped fund a white-owned startup. Nobody asks which family connections got them into Stanford, or which golf buddy invested in their company. He let that sink in for a second before continuing. The truth is, success isn't handed out in some lottery. People like me had to be twice as good just to get a seat at the table, a noticeable shift in the room. The quiet tension of an audience realizing they were watching something real unfold. Madeline, however, didn't blink. Instead, she smiled the way a chess player smiles when they think they've just cornered their opponent. That's an interesting perspective, she said, voice smooth as glass. But let's address another factor perception. She turned slightly toward the cameras. Darius, you present yourself as a self-made success. But let's talk about the public perception of your story. Some say that black entrepreneurs get an unfair advantage when it comes to media attention, that the narrative of overcoming struggle is more marketable than the thousands of white business owners who work just as hard, but don't get the same headlines. Darius let out a quiet chuckle. Oh, so now we get too much attention. Madeline kept her polished smile, but a slight shift in her, gave a polite nod. Appreciate you having me. She leaned in, slightly flipping through her cue cards. Now let's get right into it. Your company recently landed a $200 million government contract, beating out some of the biggest names in tech. That's impressive. Darius knew this game build him up first, make it seem like they respected his achievements. He gave a measured response. It was a long process, but yeah, we put in the work. We developed a security encryption system that outperformed our competitors, simple as that. Madeline crossed her legs. Some have called it groundbreaking, a subtle pause, but others have raised questions. Darius didn't flinch questions. She picked up a card, reading aloud. Some industry experts say Innovis benefited from certain federal diversity incentives, that companies like yours have an edge in these contracts because agencies are looking to diversify their vendors, that perhaps this wasn't just about being the best, but about meeting a quota there. It was the real reason he was here. Darius let a beat pass before he responded. I've heard that argument before. It's funny, though. When a black entrepreneur wins, it's special treatment. But when a legacy firm run by the same families for generations lands those same deals, nobody questions it. The air in the studio shifted. The producers off camera glanced at each other. Madeline held her ground. So you're saying race played no role at all in your success? Darius chuckled, shaking his head. Let me ask you this: when SpaceX won its NASA contracts, was it because Elon Musk met a diversity quota when Jeff Bezos landed government deals for Blue Origin? Was it because of his background, or do we only ask that question when the CEO looks like me? Madeline's expression barely flickered. So you don't believe these diversity programs help? Darius folded his hands. They help level the playing field. But what people don't realize is the playing field was never level to begin with. But Madeline wasn't done yet. She had something else up her sleeve. Madeline's smile sharpened like a blade hidden in silk. She glanced at her cue cards, then back up at Darius. Well, Darius, let's talk about that playing field you mentioned. She said, her tone shifting from polite curiosity to something a little colder. You grew up in Birmingham, Alabama. Single mother public school, worked your way up from nothing. That's inspiring. Darius gave a slow nod, sensing where this was going. Madeline continued, But here's what some might wonder. How does someone with no Ivy League background, no deep family connections go from a struggling neighborhood to securing contracts that... She tried to discredit him on live TV. His response, it changed everything. The email came late in the afternoon. A short, formal message from the producers of the Morning Exchange. One of the most watched talk shows in the country. They wanted Darius Bell, tech entrepreneur and CEO of Innovis, to be a guest on their upcoming segment about diversity in business. Darius had seen this play before a mainstream platform, suddenly remembering black entrepreneurs exist, trotting them out for a few minutes of applause before moving on to the next trending topic. But this was different. Innovis wasn't some upstart. They had just secured a multi-million-dollar defense contract, outbidding some of the biggest names in the industry. That wasn't luck, that was 2 decades of relentless work. Still, he hesitated before accepting something, felt off his assistant. Tasha picked up on his hesitation. You sure you want to do this? You know how these shows are. They love a success story. But they love tearing one down even more. Darius leaned back in his chair. I'll handle it. Besides, it's national exposure. Let's see what they have to say. Tasha exhaled, shaking her head. Just don't let them bait you. He nodded, though deep down he knew the game. If this interview was a setup, they were playing chess with the wrong man. The morning of the interview, Darius arrived at KXNT Studios in Los Angeles. The air in the green room was cool, sterile. A young producer greeted him, barely looking up from her clipboard. Mr. Bell, thanks for being here. We'll mic you up in 5. No small talk. No warm-up, just in and out like a transaction. As he sat in the makeup chair, an assistant powdered his face with practiced indifference. The monitor on the wall showed the live broadcast of the show, a panel segment on celebrity scandals, followed by a cooking demo, then a transition card coming up next. The black tech boom. Is it talent or special treatment? Darius clenched his jaw, so this was the angle, but if they thought they had the upper hand, they were in for a surprise. But he wouldn't realize just how far they were willing to go. The set of the Morning Exchange was designed to look inviting, soft blues and golds, a glass coffee table between the host's chair and the guests. Cameras hovered like silent observers, capturing every movement, every expression. Darius adjusted his suit jacket as he took his seat across from Madeline Royce. The show's lead anchor, a seasoned journalist with a reputation for asking tough questions. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. Darius Bell. She began, her voice, smooth practice, CEO of Innovis, a true American success story. Darius.